Welcome to the Horror Script Podcast.
All right, welcome everyone to another exciting episode, a special episode of the Horror Script Podcast. Today I am joined by Catherine Stewart. If you've recently listened to our episode of Night of the Comet, she is the star in this film. Also Weekend at Bernie's, The Last Starfighter, and many, many others. So thank you, Catherine, for joining me. I appreciate it.
It's my pleasure. Just so you know, my whole professional name is Catherine Mary Stewart.
Oh, I'm sorry.
I know. It's so ridiculous, but it's like you kind of, it's sort of your product label in a way. I was listening to a podcast with Quentin Tarantino, and he's like, yeah, that actress, she has the same name as everybody else. It's Catherine Mary Elizabeth Stewart or something. And I was like, oh, because I did. But I have to say, I do have this stupid three name. But I was like, when I first got into this whole acting thing, the director who directed me in my first movie was like, he didn't like my real name. So I took my mother's maiden name and I added the Mary, and I'm not sure if I regret it or not, but I mean, Catherine Stewart and Catherine Mary Stewart are pretty, I don't think you could get any more white bread than that. Most people think I'm a nun or something, or at least Catholic, which I'm not, but so I have to go by this whole Catherine Mary Stewart. So long.
All right.
It's long and boring. And yeah, I love Mary Elizabeth Mastrantonio, Mary Stuart Masterson, Ugh.
So there's a lot of others that this way, this helps differentiate you from those others.
Well, apparently it doesn't differentiate me from the others, according to Quentin Tarantino. But I think I was like I said, I mean, I chose this name like back in the late 70s, early 80s, and I feel like I was one of the first. I mean, so darn it, that's my theory, and I'm sticking with it.
Yeah, no. Hey, if it works for you, then yes. So, Catherine Mary Stewart, thank you very much. I appreciate it. So first question that we have to ask is, do you like horror movies?
I do and I don't. I have a love-hate relationship with horror movies because when I go to them, they scare the crap out of me. And so, like, my husband really likes them. He thinks they're kind of funny, because there is a real sort of comical element to them, and real horror enthusiasts. They are just, I think, just waiting to have something uniquely scary freak them out. But I just sit there, wait. It doesn't have to be uniquely scary to just really freak me out. And I'm the one in the audience that is screaming at the top of her lungs. So I like them, but they give me a heart attack.
But that's the thrill of it. And I mean, if people are in the theater and you're in there and you have that scream or that shriek out of scare, it just makes that experience better for the other audience members. So that's great. Do you have a particular movie?
A particular movie that I like? Oh gosh. Let's see. Not off the top of my head. I really should have had this figured out. Oh, well. I have to say I sort of like apocalypse movies a lot.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean, like, I'm going way back with this one, but On the Beach was, I thought, a really great apocalypse movie. It's 1959, I think, but it's just really a unique, to me, telling of the story as opposed to so many apocalyptic movies. Well, Night of the Comet is pretty unique too. I guess you could consider that
Yeah.
apocalyptic, but I always look for sort of a unique angle. I mean, so many apocalyptic movies have people realizing that it's the end of the world and everybody is freaking out. They're either mass murdering everybody or they're, drinking and partying really hardy, all that stuff. And what I liked about On the Beach is that it's more just kind of a psychological exploration about it's sort of approached in a very calm way, and they really character build. Everybody sort of reacts a little bit differently to what it means, as most of the characters are sitting in Australia because the apocalypse, whatever it is that's covering the earth and killing everybody, Australia is kind of like the last place. I just thought it was kind of fascinating. I love real character-driven movies like that.
Yeah.
Yeah, so that was sort of one of my favorite ones. In terms of horror movies, oh gosh, I'm like trying to think off the top of my head, ones that really, really freaked me out. And it's not coming to me at the moment. But I like it also like the
That's all
original
right.
like Halloween movies, like the original ones. I'm not crazy about the sequels so much, or Nightmare on Elm Street,
Yeah.
because it's a new concept and it takes everybody off guard. But with the sequels, it just gets like, ugh, just ringing out the old theme over and over again. Gets a little old.
Right.
I like the
Repetitive.
classics. I
Yeah.
like the classics.
Yeah. No. And I mean, I love them. So that's, I could agree with you on that. So our Night of the Comet review was actually a listener request, and we were really grateful for that request because it led us to us getting together. So your fan base on this has been pretty well known, and I would think that parents would have introduced Night of the Comet to their kids over the years growing up. Have you noticed fans from a younger generation jumping on board and loving this movie as well? Or has it been mostly that original generation from the 80s and 90s?
Once I started doing conventions and things, it became apparent that there was a pretty solid fan base that kind of grew, especially out of the like 80s, 90s VHS, base, when it was released on VHS, and it was the kind of movie that I think it might have been one of those movies that you were allowed to see by yourself for the first time, for instance. It was just right on the cusp of being like innocent enough for, say, a 13-year-old, but edgy enough that it kept their interest. It wasn't Bambi or something like that. And the stories that I've heard over and over again in terms of why it grew such a fan base back in the day is that it acted like a babysitter in many cases. Just they'd put in the VHS and they'd watch it over and over and over again. And a lot of people became really passionate about it, just knew the movie inside out. And now that they're having children, they are introducing it to their kids. And when you look at it compared to like the movies that you see nowadays with all the CGI and special effects and all that other stuff, it's a pretty basic movie. But what I think kind of makes it stand out is what I was talking about earlier, is you kind of get to know the characters and you can sort of relate to the characters, especially if you're that age. These are just,
Yeah.
these girls are not complicated girls. And that's what makes it so interesting. They happen to be capable of taking care of themselves when the world ends, basically, and they're surrounded by zombies or whatever you want to call them. Um, uh, but they're relatable. They're not a superhero. They're not something way into the future. They're just these little valley girls that are just trying to get by, and then all of a sudden the world ends. And there's an interesting story about the director, writer. His name is pronounced Tom. It's basically pronounced Tom. It's not Thom or them, and it's Thom Eberhardt. Um,
I am terrible at pronouncing names,
right.
so
Well, it's
that's
a weird
why.
spelling because it's Thom, but it is
Yeah.
just Tom. Um, but he loves kind of apocalyptic movies too, but he also likes the quirkiness, that he introduced in this. And I guess when he was trying to come up with a concept, he thought, oh, teenage girls at the end of the world, what would that be like? So he interviewed a bunch of teenage girls. And to his surprise, they their reaction was not, oh my God, oh, that's so scary. What are we gonna do? Oh, their reaction was, you mean our parents aren't around? We can do whatever we want? This is fantastic. And that's where he got the concept from, is that as young women that are just left alone and to look after themselves, what would they do? They'd go shopping. They'd go to the mall. The stores are open. That line. So you know, it's a weird movie and it's quirky and it kind of crosses a lot of genres, from sort of funny to scary to apocalyptic to the zombie element. Um, but but he sort of hooks into the reality of like what real teenage girls would do. And so I
Yeah.
mean, it's quirky. Yeah, of course, there's dramatic license going on all over the place, but um, I think that's what people kind of grab onto. Just
Yeah.
especially girls, obviously, but I was always surprised at how many guys like it too, just because it's kind of cool. A couple of girls being able to take care of themselves.
Yeah. And I mean, and it's realistic. I mean, in the sense of a girl can take care of themselves. They don't need guys. It, you always have that difference. But guys are always the lead and things like
Yeah,
that.
yeah,
It's why.
yeah. And which was unusual. It's funny because when I read the script, it didn't really occur to me that that was a thing, that girls couldn't do this stuff. I just kind of loved the character because up to then I was always like the girl next door. And this was gave her kind of more of a tough, independent, whatever element, which was more like me anyway. And but I didn't really think about the fact that, oh, it's a couple of girls that are actually looking out for themselves. So, but that's, I mean, that's one of the things about it, is it's, female driven, which is kind of great. But I don't think
Yeah.
that has. I also feel at the same time. I feel like, why do we keep having to put everything into these little spaces? It's this and that, or it's that, or it's this, or it's that. I mean, we're just every. It's a story and it's fun, and who cares if the leads are female or male or whatever? If it works,
Right.
it works.
Yeah. So, and you did play, like you said, you played a tougher character. And saw on a previous interview that you did that you grew up with, you had brothers, I think you said. So did that help you to kind of give your own personal take onto this role?
Well, probably. I mean, I have two older brothers, and then there was me. And so I was always kind of scrambling for attention, because they would go off and do all their boy junk. And I'm like, why can't I do that too? Um, so that was that. So I think, that gave me maybe uh, sort of a tougher foundation or something like that. But I've always been pretty independent and pretty animated, and yeah, I'm sure it had some influence. And my mother was not like, she was. I would say, this seems to be a swear word these days, but she was definitely a feminist. But she was, still mom and everything. But she wasn't a girly girl. I didn't get my nails painted or
Mhm.
facials or things like that. She was, she was a professor, and I think she gave me a really strong foundation as a woman or as a human being in general. She gave my brothers a great foundation too. So yeah, I think, does that answer your question?
Yeah. Yeah. I just, like how your upbringing helped shape that character. So yeah, I think so. Now, did you actually get to shoot a machine gun for that role, like
Yeah,
with just
yeah.
blanks in it, right?
Right. Oh, for sure. But we had to learn how to do it. We went to a shooting range and everything, and of course, not knowing anything about guns at all at that time, um, we went to the shooting range so that they could, give us a sense of how the machine guns work. They were Mac 10s, and what they felt like and what they felt with the kick and all that other stuff. And of course, during it, I was like holding the thing, and then I sort of turned to the instructor, pointing the gun at him, and saying, "Was that okay?" And he's like, "No," So I learned very quickly the rule about you never point a gun at anybody, obviously. Yeah, we were pretty grassroots, I would say, in terms of knowledge about guns, but we learned very quickly, and of course, how careful you have to be with that sort of thing. But we shot him.
Yeah. That's cool. Yeah.
Yeah.
Now, did you bring that to your brothers? Like, hey, I shot a machine gun. Have you ever like just joking with them at all?
um, did I have to bring it to them? Probably not. They had to see it for themselves. I can let them stew in their own, grief about not being able to do
Jealousy.
that. So that jealousy, that's right. Um, yeah, I did not bring that to my brothers, but I mean, honestly, they probably were like, "Oh, there she goes again."
Yeah, you get to do all these cool things. I mean, it's awesome. Really.
Yeah, it's part of the really fun stuff about being an actor is these fringe benefits about being able to sort of live vicariously through the characters. So I've played so many different characters, and it's been so much fun. And a lot of times I'm attracted to characters because I've never done them before, or they're like a fantasy thing for me. Oh, a rock and roll star. Yay, I'll do that
Yeah.
now. Oh, yeah, for sure.
So, what were some of your favorites?
Um, well, Reg was really fun for me because she was tough and she could handle herself. And one of my favorite scenes was fighting the zombie in the alley after I leave the theater, and I'm like, you know, trying to defend myself against this guy. We have that little brief fight scene where, and
Yeah.
he was a stunt guy, so he knew what he was doing. So I felt pretty comfortable doing it. But he literally lifted me up, swung me around, and threw me into these boxes. I loved it. I love doing that. I did a movie, just sort of, talking about living vicariously through the characters. I did a movie called Scenes from the Gold Mine, another small movie where I play this rock and roll singer. And, who doesn't fantasize about being a rock and roll singer? I don't know. I always did. So that was just so much fun to do as well. I mean, I've done lots of different things, like I, alcoholics, all sorts of interesting,
Oh
fun
yeah.
characters. I mean, it's really interesting to just kind of explore all this stuff and dig deep and try to bring out these characters in the most realistic way you can. It's fun.
Yeah, that's. I mean, I've had a little experience with in high school in drama. We did a couple of acting plays and stuff, and I loved it. So I can only imagine how fun it is to be in film and doing all these. So it's
It
great.
really is. I mean, you have to take it seriously, obviously, but at the same time, there's so much, for me anyway, so much joy in acting. Um, and I feel like that's what it should be about.
Yeah. No, absolutely. Uh, so a couple other things with Night of the Comet, and then we'll move on to some other stuff. But so if there was an apocalyptic event currently, What stores would you raid?
Oh, what stores would I raid? Oh, probably food stores at this age. It'd be like, excellent, I can get a really nice steak and some really high-end fruits and vegetables. That's pretty boring, I guess. But I don't know. Yeah, that's a great question. I mean, maybe like, I live in New York, maybe cruising some Fifth Avenue shops, high-end clothing stores. I've never been a big spender or really a big shopper per se, but it would be really fun to kind of reflect what the girls did, but maybe way higher end. You know what I mean? Like things
Oh
that you
yeah.
would never even think about buying. Um, because they're just so ridiculously expensive. It might be really fun to do something like that.
Yeah, I mean, there's all of that is available in New York. It's,
Yeah.
Prada and Gucci and all those
Yeah.
extremely high-end, ridiculously priced stuff. Yes.
Yeah. I mean, it might be really kind of fun just to check out what all these really mega rich people are talking about.
Yeah. Walk into Harriet Weinstein or Weinstein or what's the jewelry store?
Harry Winston.
Harry
Harry Winston,
Winston,
yeah, or
uh,
Tiffany's.
yeah,
Oh,
or Tiffany. Yeah.
Tiffany's. Oh my gosh, they have some serious jewels and Tiffany's, man. It's really, I actually have been into Tiffany's just to kind of look many times on Fifth Avenue. That's really fun. I mean, there's some
Yeah.
crazy, huge diamonds and things like that there. It's fun.
Yeah. I mean, there's gorgeous stuff. It's a couple times I go in to walk around and look. That's
Just just
it.
walk around and look and just pretend. Ooh, could you imagine wearing
Yeah.
that?
Yeah. So, let's see. Oh, so were there any parts of filming Night of the Comet that were difficult or maybe a little uncomfortable or anything like that?
Well, you guys were talking about how low a budget it was. So I always call it guerrilla filmmaking because you just don't have any of the stuff. You don't have the dressing rooms, uh, you just don't have any of the luxury stuff that you normally might, or any of the basic stuff really that you might have on a larger set. So that was, I mean, but the thing is, we were young and we really loved the script, and it was a real group effort kind of thing. I mean, one day the makeup guy didn't show up. There was a makeup guy, and so Kelly and I did our own hair and makeup that day. We shot, the stuff in downtown LA where it's completely empty. Back in those days, there weren't as many people living downtown as there are now, and it was mostly like banks and hotels and people, business people would sort of show up in LA and meet and then leave. There just wasn't a lot of people living there. It's completely different now. But to make sure that the streets were completely empty, we shot like, I don't know, Christmas morning or something like that in downtown LA. So it was really deserted. I mean, we didn't have the budget to have a bunch of cops holding back traffic or anything like that. So what you see was the reality of the situation. For all the scenes downtown, the ending scene, the scene where I'm riding the motorcycle and I stop and there's an empty car there and I look in, all those scenes were authentically, on the streets that were abandoned. So that was sort of, I mean, just the fact that we had to shoot like Christmas morning
Yeah.
isn't the most fun in the world, but at the same time, um, we all knew what we were getting ourselves into, so we were totally up for it. I What I hate the most is shooting at night, and that was the whole mall scene where we're trying on clothes. Um, that was a working store, and so we couldn't start shooting until it closed. And so they'd have to set everything up, and we'd just shoot all night, just blast it out, just shooting all night long. I'm like I said, I hate shooting at night. My body never changes to that time. I can't sleep during the day. So that is always really hard. But I mean, it was still there was still a lot of fun shooting that stuff. The stuff when we go into the basement with uh, the box boys or whatever they were. Um, that was kind of tough because we were literally chained up and we just had to sit there and our as far as we were concerned, we were dead. So those are always
Yeah.
challenging scenes to portray and trying to be realistic about it. Um, but again, it was all kind of tongue in cheek. I mean, I really there was never anything really super tough about it. It just wasn't a luxury movie set.
Yeah. Yeah. And those guys, they threw me in that movie. I was a little confused by them. Their characters were changing, right? Like they were infected with the comet dust and they were starting to transition. Is that why they were so weird?
Oh yeah, I mean, a part of the transition is, of course, you crave human flesh. So yeah, the eyes start to sink, and they do go through this transformation, and they just kind of go wacko. Yeah, I mean, I love those. I love Ivan Roth who played. What was this character's name? Do you remember? The little head guy. Oh, the other guy is, uh, you know, uh, the one who talks to the girls when they're in the mall. That guy.
Yeah. He's wearing the
Um,
glasses.
Right, the one in the glasses.
Mhm.
And he really had a lot to do with creating that character. They wanted him to have sort of this raspy voice because also part of it is, they all turn to dust eventually. So they slowly but surely, any kind of moisture or whatever in their body is disappearing. And so they wanted him to talk sort of like this as though he didn't, he couldn't swallow properly or whatever. And it wasn't working for some reason, sound wise. So they were like, how can we do this? So he came up with this whole, hello, teenage common zombies, or whatever his lines were in that. He came up with that whole character. And I think it's brilliant. I think he's a great addition to this crazy little story. I mean, it goes off on so many bizarre tangents, but that's the point.
Yeah.
It's meant to be quirky and sort of silly. And I think that, like, my kids watched it when they were very young, and it did scare them because they didn't pick up on all the little, subtle humor and all that other stuff. It freaked them out a little bit. But as an adult, it's not scary, but it's not meant to be a terrifying movie. And
Right.
interestingly, though, the producers thought of it as a horror, just a traditional horror movie, and that was never Thom Eberhardt's idea of what he wanted it to be at all. Which so at times there was a debate about, okay, let's shoot this scene in a really scary way, and then we'll shoot it again in the way Tom wrote it or whatever. Um, but fortunately, I think um, it kind of it stayed the way Tom wanted it to be, which I think really makes it unique. I think it would have been a really mediocre horror movie, frankly. But with these all these added elements to it, like I think it makes it different, really different, and I think that's what the fans of the movie really like about it.
Yeah, no, it is a fun movie, so it works. But and even though it, you're right, it technically isn't categorized as a horror movie. It's a sci-fi thriller action. I think action's in there. But it still touches that line of horror. So that's why we were like, yeah, we're happy to cover it.
Yeah, why not? It has a
Yeah,
little
but
bit of
it is
that
a
in
fun
there.
movie.
I think so too.
Yeah, the mutant zombies are in there. Yeah, people are getting eaten with flesh.
Right? I know. That guy who attacked me in the alley. He just finished eating my boyfriend.
Yeah.
Yuck. Oh,
And then he's going after for you. So
I know.
very,
Aren't you full
very
already?
nice.
I mean, he's a pretty big
Yeah.
guy. Leave
How
me
much are you gonna eat
alone.
though? You ate a human. It's
Yeah.
so in this also you play an expert arcade player, I guess, video arcade
Oh,
player.
yeah.
And
Yeah,
and
yeah, yeah.
and in I think you also do in Last Starfighter as well, right?
Well, Lance Guest, who played my boyfriend in that, Alex, he's the guy who is really, really good at the arcade game.
Mhm.
And thus he is transported off to the universe to fight the real war that's going on out there. But yeah, in this one, it's like, it's kind of, they sort of introduce Reggie with her playing this game. So she's not your traditional girly girl again.
Mhm.
And she's obviously really, really good because her, REG is all the way, it takes up the entire, I don't know, you call it page or screen, whatever, except
Scream, yeah.
when she finds DMK and the whole technical thing that your brother was talking about where, or I don't know if it was you or your brother who was saying this, but about how they only really move down once. He doesn't just the
Oh,
initials don't just disappear. I mean, other people
right.
have made that comment as well. I was just like, oh yeah, I guess you're right. I don't know. Again, theatrical license. It was just
Yes.
a way of driving the point home, I guess. But yeah, that was kind of I think it helped to establish her character a little bit because they never revisited that. But she was obviously a girl who knew her own mind, kind of a thing.
But it threw that DMK storyline in there where it started off with it and then it ends up in the finale of the film, which is I loved it. I thought that was a great, brilliant wraparound. So
Yeah,
I really enjoyed that part. But
yeah, that was
did you
funny.
play video games? Did you play video
Not
games?
not really. I really didn't.
No.
And when we shot that little, giveaway here, there really wasn't anything on the screen. I mean, the director was just like telling me what to do. And I think the DP really liked shooting feet. So it got some feet action in there. Um, uh, but I really didn't play arcade games much. I mean, a little bit of Pac-Man maybe. And this is how old I am. When they first came out, Pac-Man was huge. I kind of dug that game. But these ones,
Yeah.
they completely throw me off. I get overwhelmed with these kind of arcade games where you're shooting things out of the sky and stuff like that.
Yeah. But you looked believable doing it. So
Well, thank you. I mean, yeah, it made me look cool. Way cooler than I actually am.
I don't know. I don't know about that. That's I think you're pretty cool and I think a lot of people would agree with that.
Yeah. Thank you.
You're welcome. So all right, so we got to touch on Weekend at Bernie's, of course, because I mean, God, I loved watching that as I want to say a kid, but when I was younger, because it was always on, and it was just one of my favorites. Just this dead guy getting brought around all over the beach house, and just like put in all these positions. But apparently, Terry Kiser was this prankster. Did he ever do any kind of scares to anyone on set or anything, popping out or pulling jokes?
I, well, in fact, what I do remember is Ted Kotcheff, the director, pulling a prank on him. I think it was like the first scene where he had to be dead, It was when, the boys come to the beach house and they find him at his desk and he's already dead. And they do this whole scene around it. And it slowly unfolds that they get that he's dead and stuff like that. And that was actually Terry sitting there. And it was a fairly long scene from what I recall. But what Ted did, the director, he just kept, after the scene was done, and Terry had been sitting there holding his breath and just trying to look dead. Ted just kept the cameras rolling. He didn't say cut. So the big joke was finally Terry's like, because he'd been sitting there for so long, not breathing. So, I mean, Terry was, he's a hilarious man, and he is one of the nicest guys I know. And I always feel like it's really a statement about how brilliant he is as an actor, being able to play dead, but you can't take your eyes off him. You know what I mean? He's got these expressions on his
Yeah.
face. That doesn't just that takes work. Let me just say it that way. He had to create a character that was dead, that was interesting. I mean, that's a hard thing to do, but he did it,
Yeah.
man. And I feel like that's his brilliance right there. He was so good.
That was, I mean, yeah, it's fascinating to give life to a dead character.
I know.
You're right, it's impressive.
Yeah, I mean, you literally, when Bernie was on camera, you weren't looking at anything else, and all this stuff is going on around him, and you're just looking at Bernie because you're wondering what's going to happen next with this guy. Yeah, he was terrific, but he actually got hurt playing that, especially. I guess one of the injuries that he sustained was when they were sort of escaping in the motorboat just before he bounces off the back of it. It was him, and he had to be completely limp and allow the boat, as it bounced across the waves, to bounce him, and he wrecked his back, man. He really got hurt. um but yeah, when I read that script, I was excited to be a part of it because of the cast and the director and all that. But when I read that scene about the dead body falls off the back of the boat, and the two boys are like, they hear the gong of it hitting the hitting the boy behind them. Um, I thought, that is just horrible. Who's gonna laugh at that? That's the weirdest, crudest thing I've ever seen in my life. And of course, that's the scene that everybody talks about and laughs about. I think that's so hilarious. That's how much I knew about that kind of comedy.
Yeah, you never know what's going to work and what doesn't. And you reading this script, were you thinking more of along the lines of like, well, this is an iffy script, but the other actors in character, or the director that I'm going to be able to work with, there's got to be something here? Or what were you thinking when you were reading that?
Well, I wanted to be not only Ted Kotcheff and Jonathan Silverman and um, this happens to me, Andrew McCarthy, uh, were very well established actors and director, and I had never really done a comedy before either. So I really wanted to do that. I mean, Night of the Comet, yes, there were some comedic things, but this was like, a purebred, as I call it, sophomoric comedy, because it's just so silly that it's funny. I just wanted to be a part of that. Uh, yeah, I mean, I felt like it was a pretty big movie, and this might be a really interesting experience. So I was really pleased when I was cast.
Yeah, I mean, it's a great role. It's it, it's funny because I read that Andrew McCarthy was supposed to play the other character Richard.
Yeah, Richard. Yeah.
And so he would have been your love interest in that. So do you think you would have played that differently, or do you think it would have still just worked out the same?
It would have been different because I mean, I think that casting Jonathan in that character was m- more appropriate, put it that way. I mean, Andrew McCarthy was so good as that kind of, slimy business guy who just wants to get ahead and get laid, basically. It would have been a different dynamic for sure. Yeah, Jonathan Silverman is much more straight laced. Is it? Yeah, we and he and I got along really, really well. So I think I'm glad that it was cast the way it was.
Very good. So, so one of the other TV shows that I've watched you in was the Alfred Hitchcock Presents season 2, episode 11, Tragedy Tonight. Uh, and that was a very interesting, messed up show, but I liked it. It was great. Um, do do actors really torture their family members like that to practice roles, or
Oh,
is it kind of
to rehearse?
exacerbated
Do
in that?
they
Yeah,
torture each other to rehearse? That's where again you have to sort of dig into your imagination and kind of bring out that sort of side of you, I guess. That's what's so interesting about acting. I mean, you said you had some experience yourself. You really have to put your imagination into play, and also I think every character, certainly that I've played, has a little bit of me in there. We're complicated human beings are, and we might not want to admit sort of darker sides to ourselves, but it's really interesting to kind of find that.
yeah. And did you enjoy that role? I know you did some TV things before and after, but that was one of the things that I picked up on. Of it's these Alfred Hitchcock stories that are twisted, and you play this architect and your sister's an actress, and she keeps messing with you in your career, and then at the end, there's this huge what.
Yeah,
So,
yeah. Well, that's what, yeah. It's kind of, you don't see those kind of things anymore on television. Everything is, Netflix and streaming, and traditional television just doesn't really exist very much anymore, except for like Hallmark, or it seems to be more and more just for like my generation. My kids, I've got kids in their 20s, and they don't watch TV. They watch their computer, they stream things, they watch their phone. And so those kind of television movies, which I think were really entertaining, and
yeah.
definitely had a niche. Um, Alfred Hitchcock, I did several of those, and they were always kind of weird. There was a weird twist to them. You just don't see that kind of thing, and that's also. I mean, I guess there's a slight. There's psychological horrors. They're not just you know trying to produce as much blood as you can, or try to scare the person. There's more nuance than that, I think, in these Alfred Hitchcock things. Um, and yeah, I miss that kind of stuff. It's really super fun playing like the psychological side of a character that you might not normally see. And a lot of them also were like futuristic. Like, what would happen if your house was run by a robot and it went rogue? And I did one of those, and I did one which was really, really interesting. It's also sort of they're not so far from the truth also. Like, they could be futuristic, and they're sort of like, what would happen if this happened? um, I did one where I was I wanted to get pregnant, but there was this new thing where you could inject something, some DNA, I guess, into your baby, and it would be perfect. It would be the perfect child. And you hear about that kind of thing being talked about, cloning and all that stuff. So they kind of looked at these subjects that are sort of taboo, but absolutely possible. And of course, everything goes terribly wrong. Yeah, it's fun playing those kind of things.
Yeah, I mean it was, and it's interesting to watch them too. And you're right, they don't do them as much. It's rare, so it's fun to find those little hidden gems that are out there. So
Yeah,
I like that. That's
there was
great.
a lot more, I think, variety back in the sort of network days where they did all these like mini series and TV movies, and remember the after school specials and all that kind of stuff.
Oh yeah.
There was a lot going on and very accessible. Um, Now it's everything's so much more sophisticated and on every level, in the business, from casting to writing to producing to this whole streaming idea that's fairly new still, but just, you know, people just launched into all that stuff. Yeah, it's a different business now than when I was growing up in the business. But, it is what it is, and the audience is attracted to what they know.
Yeah. So one of the things I was curious about was your career started a little bit more unconventional than probably others, because you had lead roles in what was it, Powderheads and The Apple, right? They were your first two roles. And then you did Nighthawk with Sylvester Stallone, and it was more of a, I guess, were you an extra, or was it? I mean, how
Um,
was that
I
casting?
I don't think you could have. I don't think, because I actually said a few words, I don't think you could have technically called me an extra. But if you blinked, you would miss me for sure. But I was sort of the fun thing about that was, first of all, being able to meet Sylvester Stallone was very cool, because that was back, in the Rocky days, and he was iconic.
That just,
But
yeah.
yeah, but I sort of established Rutger Hauer's character as just one of the most evil terrorists there could be, because my role was as I was this young girl working behind a perfume counter in a department store, and he comes up and he's sort of seductively asking me about perfumes, and I'm very young, very innocent, and his character was very intimidating, and Rutger Hauer never broke character, so he scared the crap out of me. He really did. I was just like, oh my god, who is this person? And as he's sort of talking to me about perfumes and kind of, trying, sort of flirting with me, he's shoving a bomb under my counter, and then the next shot is the entire store is blown out from they show it from the outside. So it's a small role, but it's very pivotal.
Yeah.
Because it really does
Yeah.
establish what a horrible human being he is.
But like roles like that, I mean, even though they were a small role, you enjoyed those. I would guess.
Well, also at that point, I mean, nothing else had really come out. So I was still. Also, I started as a dancer. So I was in London when I was cast in the first movie that I did called The Apple. I was in London training as a dancer. And I went to this audition by chance to audition as a dancer, because it was a rock musical and they had this huge cast of dancers. And the director saw me in that, and sort of pulled me out of this cattle call dance audition and asked me if I acted. And I said yes, because I was going to a performing arts school. It focused on dance, but I'd done, theater in school, and This school that I was going to in London was a general performing arts school. So you're studying acting and all sorts of stuff. So, I mean, when I said, oh, yes, I act, I was like, I could say that. And I read from the role. He thought that I looked right for the lead role in this movie. So I read for it and I got it. I ended up getting it. So my point is when this sort of career of mine took off, the first thing that I ever did was a lead role. In the back of my mind, I was sort of like going with the flow, and I found it really interesting and really fun, and was kind of sucking everything up like a sponge. But I was always like, if this doesn't work out, I could just go back to dance, which was my first love anyway. And so I went from doing these two lead roles, which like I said, hadn't come out. So I hadn't really established myself as a lead actress. And I was also like, yeah, I just want to do whatever I can do and we'll see what happens. I mean, my whole life wasn't like, if I don't make it in this business, I'm going to kill myself or something. I was just like, just kind of going with it and doing whatever came up. So it was really, and things, kind of snowballed after a while. I mean, the fact when The Apple came out and it did sort of establish me as a lead actress in a feature film, then doors started opening up for me. So that was great. But at first I was just like, I'll see where this takes me.
Yeah. And do you still dance?
I really don't.
No.
I just, I do work out stuff like that, but I don't think my body could do it anymore, frankly. I sort of got these blown out knees and my back sort of hurts. But I do, my workout per se is dance based and yoga and Pilates, that kind of stuff. I'm still very grounded in that kind of exercise, but I don't take dance class anymore.
No. So if they called you up for Dancing with the Stars, would you do it or?
Well, that's different. I mean, I've been trying to get on that show for years. And at first, when it was first out, it was like, oh, they would never invite me on this because I'm a dancer. And now it's like, they
have dancers on there.
Holy smokes. I mean, yeah, they have dancers, they have gymnasts, they have skaters. All those kind of sports you get this incredible dance training. And of course you have the flexibility and the strength. So, that would certainly not keep them from hiring me on the show. But also, I always think of myself, okay, at this point, I would be the lone old person on it.
I don't know. I think they have older people. You're not. I don't see. That's the thing. I also think like people think old. Old is like 80. Like 80s and 90s. So I don't think you're anywhere even close to that. So
and also the other thing about that is when it first started, I mean, they were Dancing with the Stars. The stars were like just regular working actor schmucks. Now they're getting they get big names now. So I don't know. I mean, I've always thought it would be really cool to be on that show because I know how hard it is to learn these routines. It's really hard. And I think it would be really challenging and fun, but who knows? I mean, I think I'd have to build up my cred somehow. You know what I mean? I don't know if there are still, Weekend at Bernie's has a lot of cred still. Maybe, I don't know.
Yeah, no, my wife and I used to watch it when it was first out for the first couple seasons, and I don't watch it that much anymore, but if they ever asked you to come on, I would definitely strike it back up and start watching again. So
thank you. I know that it's always been something I've thought would be really cool to do, but maybe you never know.
Yeah, and they're still going with it. So
they're still going, man. It's the show that some of these reality shows or whatever just never die. It's like 30 years. I'm like, what? It's been on for 30 years? God.
So are you working on anything now? Is there something recently that's going to be coming out that you're working on?
Well, speaking of dance, I did a movie with a friend of mine, Tom Malloy. Um, I've been in a couple of his movies. Actually, I was talking to my husband about this, because I haven't really done serious horror genre movies that I could remember, but I did one with Tom back in like the 90s, like the late 90s or something, called The Attic. And it was with Elizabeth Moss was in it. It had a great cast. And it was very scary too. So look up The Attic with Elizabeth Moss.
Yeah.
But Tom has done, like, the last couple of movies I did with him, he wrote and he directed this last one, are sort of West Coast swing dance based because he loves West Coast swing. And this latest one, um, I have a role with Joyce DeWitt is in it, from Three's Company. Remember her?
Oh
Joyce
yeah.
DeWitt? Yeah.
I loved
Um,
Three's Company. That was fun.
I know. She's in it as well. And Brianna Evigan. Yeah, she's a lovely dancer, actually. She's done a lot of dance stuff. Anyways, and Mario Cantone, who was in Sex and the City, and it's a really nice cast. But this one is called Ask Me to Dance, which is also West Coast swing based. And it's just a really sweet kind of love story about a couple of West Coast swing dancers who are, they share a love for this kind of dance, and they're both single, and they keep almost meeting each other and just missing each other by a hair. And eventually, of course, they do get together. But it's kind of it's a lovely comedy love story. It's really funny. So that's supposed to be coming out. That's coming out October 7th in theaters. So look for Ask Me to
Oh,
Dance.
very nice.
Not a horror movie at all.
That's okay.
Yeah, but a sweet movie. So I'm in that. That's the latest thing that is coming out. I've done several Christmas movies over the years. So as we get into the Hallmark Christmas movies, I usually show up in one of those. And most recently, I've been really interested in producing and developing my own stuff. So that's something I've been working on. I co-wrote a script that I would like to direct, and we're developing it now. It's been optioned by a production company, and we're sort of in the scheduling budget stage, and selling the concept to production companies. So we'll see what happens with that. That's been taking up a lot of my. I have these other projects too. I have a theater project that I've been working on, uh, and another script that I've been writing over time, and I have this. I have all these little concepts that I'm kind of throwing against the wall and seeing what sticks. But what I really like to do is get into more work behind the camera than in front of the camera. I'm really
Oh
interested
yeah.
in that kind of a thing, developing projects and directing.
Nice. All right. Well,
Yeah,
that'll be exciting to see.
I know. It takes a long time to get all this stuff, out there, and but it's very, very interesting. I'm really loving the process. So maybe
Oh,
one day.
that's
Yeah.
great. Well, it sounds like one's in the work that you're going to be releasing soon, or at least starting to develop. So that'll be
Right. We're well into the development stage, and we're starting to talk about casting. We just need to get it financed, which is the trick, right? So,
right. You know.
but we've we're, like I said, we're well into the development of it. I mean, we have the package, and we have the schedule, and we're working on the budget and all that other stuff. So we'll see what
Yeah.
happens.
Well, that would be great. I mean, I'll be looking out for it. As much as we focus on horror movies on the podcast and in our interviews, we, my brother and I, we also love the romantic comedies and and the
There
dramas and
you
actions and all those
go.
too. So, so we just enjoy movies in general.
Yeah.
But yeah, so we'll be up for watching any of those.
And recently I've become involved with somebody who does this. Are you familiar with The Moth? It's like a podcast, and it's also it's it's a, what do you call it? Sort of a program, I guess, where people come up on stage and tell their own stories based on whatever the theme of that evening is, and they have to do it without a script, and it's very interesting. It's really cool. It's called The Moth, and it's also a podcast. But I've been working with somebody on that kind of a concept, but in with the horror genre and ghost stories. It's actually called Ghost Stories by the Fire. And I was asked to do one. So I, created a story with it's kind of a ghost story with a horror story element in it. I told this really scary, sitting around a campfire kind of a story uh, within kind of a paranormal thing that happened to me. So that was really fun, but I've been becoming more and more involved with that, and we're sort of trying to develop that more into like a mainstream show. So we'll see what
Yeah.
happens with that.
Oh, I'll have to check that out because
Yeah,
that always interests too. So
yeah, you should check it out. Ghost Stories by the Fire. You can find it on Facebook and just you Google it.
all
It's
the different podcast platforms that's out there.
Well, it's not actually a podcast yet, but
Oh, okay.
they have a Facebook page, and they're developing a website and all that other stuff. We're really in the development stage of that as well. But it's
Yeah.
kind of cool. It could be sort of fun.
Yeah, it sounds fun. I mean, who doesn't like ghost stories? Especially Halloween's coming up, so now's the month for it.
That's
So,
exactly right. That's exactly right.
all right. Well, Catherine Mary Stewart, thank you so much.
Thank you,
I
Rich.
I really appreciate you joining me and just reminiscing about a lot of the different things that you've done and it's been great talking to you and a lot of fun. So thank you so much.
Thank you. Yeah, it was really fun. And good luck with everything with this show. And I'm sorry I didn't get to meet
Thank
your
you.
brother.
Oh, trust me, he's already probably crying about it. So,
Oh. Next
but
time, we'll
you
just
know,
have to do it again.
yeah, no, I'd be up for that. So, his work is a priority. He's first year, so he can't miss anything.
Oh,
So,
for sure. Well, yeah, that's fantastic that he's got that, and I wish him all the best.
thank you,
And
and
you
good luck with
too.
all of the new stuff that you're doing. Hopefully, I can't wait to see all the different things that you're about to release. So,
Thank you. Yeah, me too.
thank you. All right, well, thank you again, and everyone. Thanks for listening, and we'll be back again another time with another great interview. So uh, keep on the lookout for those. So thanks again.
Thanks.